The first time I realized I had been erased, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation, just a photograph. It appeared on my screen late at night while I was scrolling without thinking. A family photo, smiling faces, arms around shoulders, a birthday cake glowing with candles. Everyone was there, except me. I stared at it longer than I should have, waiting for my brain to correct itself. Maybe I was cropped out. Maybe I was behind the camera. Maybe this was old, but it wasn't. The caption read, "So grateful for my beautiful family. Together. Always." Posted 3 hours ago. My chest tightened, not with anger yet, but with something worse. Recognition. A quiet understanding that this wasn't an accident. This was a habit. They hadn't forgotten me. They had practiced pretending I didn't exist. My name is Lena Whitmore. I am 29 years old, and I live in Brighton, England. I grew up believing I was part of a normal family. 2 parents, 2 siblings, Sunday dinners, holiday photos, arguments that ended in silence, but never in exile. At least, that's what I thought. The truth was more careful, more controlled, like a story edited again and again until only the convenient parts remained. And I was the part they kept cutting out. It didn't happen all at once. Erasure rarely does. It begins quietly. A birthday dinner planned without telling you, a group chat you're no longer in, a family event you hear about after it's over. At first, I blamed timing, distance, adult life. Then I noticed the pattern. When my sister got engaged, I found out through a mutual friend. When my brother bought a house, I saw it online. When my mother was hospitalized for a minor surgery, no one called me. But they called each other. They visited each other. They celebrated each other. Together, without me. The night I saw the photo, I zoomed in on the faces. My mother stood in the center, smiling wide. My father's arm rested comfortably around her shoulders. My sister leaned in close, head tilted just so. My brother held the cake knife, laughing. It looked warm, complete, like I had never been part of it. I felt something crack, not loudly, but deep, because this wasn't just exclusion, it was revision. They were rewriting the story of our family, and I was no longer a character worth mentioning. I called my mother. She didn't answer. I texted, "When was this taken?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. 10 minutes passed before she replied. "Oh, it was nothing special, just a small get-together." Nothing special. I typed back slowly. Why wasn't I invited? This time there were no dots, no hesitation, just a reply that felt rehearsed. "We didn't think you'd be interested." Interested, as if family were a hobby. I stared at the message until my vision blurred, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I had been avoiding for years. They had decided who I was without asking me, and they had decided I didn't belong. I didn't confront them that night. I needed to understand first. So I went back, years back. I opened old messages, old emails, social media memories. I traced the slow disappearance of my name. Group chats renamed, photos retagged, stories told without my presence. Even worse, I found proof that when people asked about me, my family answered carefully. "Oh, Lena, she's busy. She's doing her own thing. We don't really talk much anymore." As if distance were mutual, as if silence were my choice. The earliest moment I could pinpoint was 5 years ago, the year I moved out. I had taken a job offer in Brighton, my first real chance at independence. My parents smiled and said they were proud. My siblings hugged me goodbye. But something shifted after that. I stopped being Lena who lives here and became Lena who left. And slowly, without discussion or conflict, I became optional. Then, invisible. The realization hit me hardest when I found an old family album at my parents' house months earlier, a visit I now understood differently. I had flipped through the pages, laughing, reminiscing, but something felt off. The newer photos, holidays, celebrations, milestones, were there, without me. Not a single explanation, just absence. At the time, I told myself I was imagining it. Now, I knew better. They weren't angry with me. They weren't punishing me. They were simply continuing on without me, like I was a phase that ended. That night, I didn't cry. I sat very still and very calm, feeling something solid forming inside me. A decision. Because grief is what you feel when you lose something you still want. But clarity? Clarity is what you feel when you realized you've been standing at a door that was locked from the inside. They had spent years pretending I didn't exist, and I was done pretending not to notice. I opened my laptop and began writing down dates, missed birthdays, uninvited events, conversations that never happened. Not out of bitterness, out of preparation, because people who erase you don't expect you to step back into the story. And when I did, I wouldn't be asking for a place anymore. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Every ignored message becomes evidence. Every forgot to tell you sounds like a lie. Every smile feels rehearsed. I didn't confront my family right away. I needed to understand why pretending I didn't exist was easier than simply talking to me. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went home. Not to visit, to observe. My parents' house looked the same. White fence, trimmed hedges, familiar doorbell chime. It felt like walking into a museum of my own childhood. Everything preserved. Nothing welcoming. My mother looked surprised when she opened the door. Not happy. Surprised. "Oh," she said. "You're here." Not, "I missed you," not, "I'm glad you came," just, "Oh." That single word told me more than any argument could. Inside, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. My sister smiled politely, the way you smile at someone you recognize but don't quite remember. My brother nodded once and went back to his phone. I sat down at the table where I'd done homework, eaten birthday cake, cried after my first heartbreak. No one asked how I was. No one asked how long I'd stay. They talked around me, not to me. Inside jokes, shared memories, plans I wasn't part of. I had officially become furniture. After dinner, I helped my mother wash the dishes. The silence between us was heavy, deliberate. Finally, I asked, "Did I do something wrong?" She froze, not confused, cornered. "Why would you think that?" she asked, too quickly. "Because you stopped treating me like family." She sighed, placing a plate in the rack with careful precision. "You've always been different, Lena." Different. The word families use when they don't want to explain themselves. "How?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she dried her hands and leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on the window. "You left," she said finally. "You chose a life that doesn't include us." I felt something hot rise in my chest. I moved 2 hours away for work. I didn't disappear. She shook her head. "You stopped needing us." There it was, the truth, thinly disguised as concern. My independence wasn't admired. It was resented. Later that night, I overheard my sister on the phone. "Yeah, she's here. I know. Just for a few days, I think." A pause. "No, nothing's wrong. She just shows up sometimes." shows up, like a distant relative, like an inconvenience. I went to the guest room, the room that used to be mine. They'd turned it into storage. Boxes everywhere, no photos, no trace of me. They hadn't just erased me emotionally, they'd erased me physically. I couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I went through old boxes in the garage, searching for something I couldn't name yet. That's when I found the folder, tucked behind tax documents and warranty papers, labeled simply Lena School. Inside were report cards, teacher notes, counseling records, and one letter, addressed to my parents, from a school counselor. Your daughter shows strong independence, but struggles with emotional connection at home. My hands trembled as I read. She often feels excluded within her own family. This wasn't new. They had known. For years. They just chose silence instead of change. The next morning, I asked my father directly, "Why did you stop including me?" He folded his newspaper slowly, as if preparing for a long conversation he'd avoided for too long. "You're sensitive," he said. "Everything becomes an issue with you." I stared at him. Being left out for years isn't sensitivity. He shrugged. "We didn't think it mattered that much to you." That sentence landed harder than anger ever could. They didn't hate me. They just didn't think I mattered. I left the house that afternoon with clarity, not tears, because the truth was finally visible. They didn't exclude me because I was difficult. They excluded me because I didn't fit the version of family that made them comfortable. I asked questions, I didn't follow the same path, I left. And instead of adjusting, they erased. Back in Brighton, I stopped reaching out. No calls, no messages, no reminders that I existed. And something strange happened. They didn't notice. Weeks passed, then months. Not a single check-in. That hurt, but it also freed me. Because now I understood something important. If they could pretend I didn't exist, then I could stop pretending they deserved access to me. But the story didn't end there, because people who erase you don't like it when you stop playing along. And soon enough, they noticed my absence. They noticed my absence on a Sunday. It was my mother who called first. I know because her voicemail sounded confused, not worried. "Lena, we haven't heard from you in a while. Just checking in." Checking in. As if I'd wandered off accidentally instead of being pushed out slowly, carefully, over years. I didn't call back. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. The second call came from my sister a week later, then my father. Messages stacked up, polite at first, then edged with irritation. "Are you okay? Did we do something? You should let us know you're alive." Alive. I stared at that word for a long time. They hadn't checked whether I was alive when they erased me from their lives. They were checking now because my silence made them uncomfortable. What changed wasn't my disappearance. It was my visibility elsewhere. I had started sharing parts of my life publicly, not dramatically, just honestly. Photos with friends, work achievements, small joys. A life that looked full. People commented, congratulated me, celebrated me, including people my family knew. And suddenly, the story they'd been telling others, that I was distant, busy, uninvolved, didn't fit anymore. I wasn't absent. I was thriving. Without them. My mother finally showed up in Brighton unannounced. She stood outside my flat, hands clasped tightly in front of her, eyes scanning the unfamiliar street. "You didn't tell us you moved again," she said. I met her gaze calmly. "You didn't ask." She frowned. "That's not fair." I smiled, not unkindly. That's exactly fair. Inside, she looked around like she was trying to find something wrong, something temporary, something to reassure herself that my independence was a phase. "You seem different," she said. "I am," I replied. I stopped waiting. That unsettled her. She sat down heavily and sighed. "We didn't mean to make you feel excluded." I didn't argue. "I know," I said. She looked relieved until I continued. "But intention doesn't erase impact." Silence filled the room. I spent years thinking something was wrong with me, wondering why I wasn't enough to be included. "Do you know what that does to a person?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "I believe you, but you still did." She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. I just didn't lean in either. "You should come home more," she said softly. "Be part of the family again." Again, as if I had ever truly been part of it the way they were. "I won't beg for space anymore. If I'm included, it has to be because I'm wanted, not because you're afraid of how it looks when I'm gone." She nodded slowly, like someone realizing too late that they'd misread the situation. After she left, I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I'd finally said the truth without needing permission. Weeks passed. My family tried. Awkward invitations, group messages, tentative effort. But something had changed permanently. I no longer chased belonging. I evaluated it. And sometimes I declined. The real revenge wasn't confrontation. It wasn't cutting them off dramatically. It was becoming someone who didn't need their validation to exist. I built traditions with people who chose me, celebrated holidays without anxiety, answered questions without shrinking. I stopped explaining myself, and in doing so, I stopped being invisible. One evening, my brother sent me a photo, a family gathering. This time, my name was in the caption. "Wish Lena could have been here." I stared at it for a moment. Then I replied, "I was invited elsewhere." And I meant it. They pretended I didn't exist for years, but I learned something powerful in that silence. Being erased teaches you how to write yourself back in on your own terms. And once you do, you never accept invisibility again.